Hello and welcome to Quarantine Zone, a podcast for HBO's The Last of Us. We are your hosts, Andrew Sorsini,
Dwayne D,
and Tosin Andrew.
We just watched the 6th episode of the second season of The Last of Us titled The Price. We assume you have as well. Total spoilers ahead. Let's dive into the after talk, but before we do, we've got some online spots where you can get in contact with us. You can write us an email or a voicemail at quarantinezonepod@gmail.com. Follow us on X and Blue Sky at QZPod. Add us on iTunes. Like us, leave us a review. That's how we get noticed. But the best thing you can do really is spread the word, tell your friends, word of mouth. That's how we really get the word out there. This episode was written by Neil Druckmann, Haley Gross, and Craig Mazin, and directed by Neil Druckmann, who, as you know, created the video game The Last of Us and co-created the show. Dwayne, why don't you give us a recap of this episode?
Absolutely. So we begin with two boys, Joel and Tommy, as youngsters. Joel decides that he's going to take the blame for something Tommy did so that he gets the wrath of his father instead of Tommy. Joel's father, a policeman, comes home to confront Joel about the issue. Tommy was trying to buy marijuana illegally, and when Joel saw it go wrong, he started punching. Joel tells his father that he won't let him hit Tommy, and his father pulls 2 beers out of the fridge and talks to Joel about how their grandfather would discipline him with blows so hard he once broke his jaw. He tells Joel that he's doing better than his father, and that when it comes time for Joel to become a parent, Joel should do better than him. These scenes move to Jackson 2 months into Joel's arrival. He trades Seth, who's a bartender, some Legos for some ice cream. Or a cake. He also gets a bone to make a bone saddle for Ellie, and we see him restore and customize a guitar for her. The scene's interrupted by Tommy bringing in Ellie home to Joel's home with a bandage around her forearm, high on painkillers. She's burned herself to hide her bite mark, and as mad as Joel is about it, he understands. The next morning, Joel surprises Ellie with her cake. Happy 15th birthday, Eli. And he presents her with the guitar. Ellie insists that Joel sing something to her while playing the guitar. Joel tells Ellie that he doesn't sing, and he's right. But still, he sings her a song. The timeline skips to 1 year later, Ellie's 16th birthday. Joel takes Ellie outside the Wall-to Museum. There's a life-size replica of a dinosaur and a working model of the solar system that Joel took the time to grease and make work again. Ellie asks Joel about going on patrols, and Joel says that he thinks that she might have a crush on Jesse. Ellie laughs it off and promises not to get pregnant if he lets her train with Jesse. The audience is in on Ellie's joke since it's clear that she's not attracted to boys and men, and Joel's oblivious. The museum has a space capsule from the Apollo 15 mission. That's 4 missions after Apollo 11, which first landed on the moon. Ellie grabs a helmet from a display case, and Joel gives her a cassette tape for her Walkman that has the audio recording of Apollo 11's liftoff. Ellie basks in the audio in her imagination, pretending she was going there into space as well. It's a happy time. And I did find out that the helmet that she chose comes from the same Gemini mission that she figured out, that she mentioned when she was looking in the tank and saw those burned bodies. So there's that. As they head back to Jackson, Ellie sees fireflies, the real ones. The time skips to 1 year later. It's Ellie's 17th birthday. Joel comes home early from patrol to surprise Ellie on her birthday, and he finds her fooling around with a 19-year-old cat. Joel is not happy, and Ellie's upset that he's broken up her hookup and stopped her plan to finish her tattoo on the burn scar on her forearm, and she's a little embarrassed. Ellie tries to move out of the garage that very night, and Joel catches her. She tells him that she's sorry about the tattoo and about smoking the marijuana and about hooking up with Kat, but that she's actually not sorry because it's who she is. Joel reluctantly agrees to let her move into the garage, but only once he figures out how to make the place more livable for her. It doesn't have any power or water. And he's doing a little better than his father. The next day, Joel asks Gail, the local psychologist, about the meaning of moths and assumes it means change and growth and such. But Gail says it probably means death, if you believe that sort of thing. Meanwhile, Ellie moves out. We time skip to 2 years later. Ellie's practicing how to ask Joel about Salt Lake City. She's written down her questions and what happened there. He comes to get her. It's her 19th birthday, and he's taking her out patrolling, her first patrol. They get a call that there's an infected attack on another nearby patrol. They find Eugene, Gail's wife, bitten by the infected, but not yet turned. Ellie convinces Joel that Eugene can make it back to the wall at Jackson to say goodbye to his wife, Gail. And Joel tells Ellie to go get the horses while the two men start back to the wall. Joel kills Eugene, and Ellie knows that he broke his promise. Ellie's upset that he broke his promise to her. They didn't let Eugene see his wife one last time. When they get back to Jackson, Gail meets Joel and Ellie at Eugene's body. Joel lies and tells Gail that Eugene was bit, was infected, and wanted to protect her, that he ended it himself via suicide. Gail hugs Joel, but as he does, Ellie tells her the truth, that Eugene was bit by the infected, but was lucid, and that Joel killed Eugene rather than bring him back to the wall to say goodbye. We time skip to 9 months later. It's New Year, 2029. It's the party that we saw at the beginning of the season. Joel is told by his brother Tommy's wife, Maria, that she thinks of him as family despite him being a refugee, so to speak. Joel sees Seth level a slur at Ellie, and he pushes Seth down and tells him to get out. Ellie expresses anger at Joel, and he leaves. Joel goes and sits on the porch at their house. Ellie sees him on her way home, and unlike the scene earlier in the season, she stops and talks to him. Ellie gives him an ultimatum. Tell her about what really happened in Salt Lake City, or else they're done. Joel relents, and when Ellie finds out that she was indeed the only immune one, she says that she was supposed to die, that her life would have a purpose, that everyone would be saved and spared the infected. And Joel says that he had to save her because he loves her in a way that she doesn't understand. But if she ever has one of her own, then maybe she'll do a little better than him. Ellie doesn't know if she can forgive Joel for what he's done, but she knows that she'd like to try. And that's the episode.
Thank you for the recap. Fantastic work there. And yes, a great episode. What did you think of this episode, Tosin?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a well done episode. We got to finally slow our pace. This, seemed similar to the, dramatic episode that we had last season. Was it episode 4? I think it was.
Yeah.
Where we kind of got to live with a couple people and see their sort of journey together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really appreciated that we got to get a bit more sense of who these characters are and their motivations and kind of understand a bit more about how they've changed over the period of years, and then also understand where they came from. Getting a bit of Joel's background and sort of how he was always kind of a protector.
Right.
Was really great to see. I enjoyed it, but I mean, I think Andy, you may have really enjoyed it.
Well, but again, and I've heard some criticism that this feels to check off, still continues to check off a lot of the boxes of the game, but coming from a perspective of not having played the game, I will say that this, for me, was not only perhaps the most powerful episode of the series so far, but one of the best episodes of television I've seen in a long time. I feel like this episode really represents the encapsulation of the entire dynamic of everything we've seen with Joel and Ellie from beginning to end. And I would venture to say that this one episode probably represents the theme of the entire series. So yeah, this was a big one for me.
I enjoyed it, not to that degree. I don't have any kids, and so
sure.
While I did feel the emotion and I was touched by it all, it wasn't like I was like seeing other people change within my eyes, other than these individuals. And also, I came to this story knowing of a lot of this elements that occurred in that they shared from the game. So I'd seen a bunch of the sets and a bunch of the birthday items. There were new things here too, but like it was something I expected, so it wasn't from left field.
Sure. So a lot of this did not feel fresh or new compared to what you'd already experienced in the game. I mean, I think that's a good sign. It means that they had a really solid foundational story in the video game to tell, and they're just, getting a chance to relate that with a live action adaptation.
Yeah. No, I think they added pieces. I don't recall anything about Joel as a kid or some of the other elements that they threw in to give a little bit more life and spark to the story. Yeah. But I do think that there are elements like Ellie on the dinosaur, like that was straight off from the game, and the whole birthday element. And so I think there's a lot of that is like a great reminder. And I think they've done justice to the game here.
All right. So let's start off by talking about the title, the price. What do you feel like that means to you, Tosin?
For me, I think a lot of this is talked about sort of sacrifice. Joel's father sacrificed so the children couldn't go to jail, and was also sacrificing in his work schedule, given that he had to. It seemed like he was constantly working day and night. Joel tries to sacrifice for his brother Tommy and to be the scapegoat, so that Tommy doesn't get whipped or hurt. And I think just throughout the entire episode, there's more forms of sacrifice, from the small things like, Joel giving Legos for the price for the cake to Ellie's birthday, or even Ellie's, burning her arm so that she can wear short sleeves, right? Because of the bite mark. So it's just interesting to see the degree of the price that people are paying. And it does, to a degree, seem to escalate as we get further along in the episode, right? As Ellie continues to grow up and as Joel continues to age, it's no longer this adopted baby girl. He keeps sacrificing for her and maybe potentially for him. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but he ultimately pays the price so far from a sort of physical perspective. But I think Ellie, we see that Ellie is also starting to also pay a price for the sins of her father, right?
Right. There's a little bit of like a Final Destination thing going on here, where Joel saved Ellie's life when she was clearly meant to die. And the price for that is that Joel had to give up his own life to Abby. To keep
it's
Ellie
very
alive.
Cyclical.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, totally.
Like it's we talked about it even in season 1, where there's the things that individuals do in terms of what they see as right and wrong, and how they try and move and exist in this world, and sort of the human emotions that bubble to the top, right? This show is, while they're infected, this is really more about human dynamics and relationships in the world.
Absolutely. Yes. And we've seen Joel's always been that protector. He's always, from the very beginning with his brother, he's always been the one to throw himself in front of the danger. In the prologue with his dad, and then in almost every situation in The Last of Us, all the way through Salt Lake City with Ellie, throwing himself in front of Ellie to protect herself from the danger. And I think Joel's dad in this prologue, he states the theme of this episode, which is, when it's your turn to parent, I hope you do a little better than me. And I feel like, not having played the game, I feel like this is going to end up being the theme for the entire game. And I can almost predict what the epilogue of this series is going to show us from that, knowing that seems to be the theme of this episode and the theme of this series. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, that will be very interesting. I'm very curious to hear what your thoughts are, but we'll hold that one because
Sure.
there's still, at least another season left of this series. But
maybe I'll come back to it in theories at the end of this episode.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, as you noted, like Joel is trying to change so he's not like his father. He does things like fixes the garage and is more accepting of Ellie. And
he's doing way better than his father.
Well, yes, I mean from the glimpse that we've seen, right, from the small glimpse that we've seen.
But clearly there was something that really resonated with Joel about his father, regardless of how abusive he might have been, because he ends up taking his father's watch. That's his father's watch that we see in the prologue that his father is wearing. So it's something, and that was something that was incredibly important to Joel from the beginning of the series.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because to me it sounds like family is what is important to Joel, and it may be your blood family or it may be your adopted family, and kind of Ellie is now part of that for him. Ellie, is essentially the substitute for the daughter that he could never have, right?
Right, totally.
And what's interesting is as you watch Joel and see the decisions that you make, it often feels like in his mind he's doing what is good for the greater good or good for the people, but there's a question on whether or not it's really just what's good for him.
Yeah, right. And we see that in Salt Lake City clearly.
Yeah, and I think even saving Ellie, right, is what's good for him.
Right.
Keeping her safe and potentially the town is still what's good for him, right? And I think through all of it, he's willing to lie to Gale and others and willing to take the pain away for the people he loves, right? He lied as a kid and he continues to lie as an adult, but it's lying with good intent. At least that's the way he sees it.
Right, right.
Yeah. Another point is, while Joel is choosing what's good for him, one of the things that he has no choice about is Ellie growing up, right?
Right.
And so he now has to deal with the things of a preteen and teen. And he was so used to being her safety blanket, her protecting her going through the first season, being her alarm clock, being the one who gave her shelter and food and made all the decisions for her. But now she's waking up before him. She's dressing up in time and doing other actions that, he has to learn to kind of let go a bit. And I think that just even watching that dynamic and watching the way they pull it off on screen is done really well.
Yeah. It's nice to see her evolve over the multiple birthdays and see her growth there. Which is interesting because when we first started this, having no foreknowledge of how this part 2 game was, what the narrative was laid out. I know what happened in season 1 and in the first video game because I played all the way through. So when season 2 opens up, I was under the impression that 5 years after season 1, that Ellie is mad at Joel for lying about what he did in Salt Lake City, and she held that grudge for 5 years. Like she was just angry at him for 5 years straight. In hindsight now, it doesn't make sense to have her have held that grudge in such a closed community like Jackson for that long. It does make more sense that there was a recent event that triggered that resentment, which we saw with the thing with Eugene in the forest, Eugene getting killed in the forest. But it does color like how I see the entire episode going back. The entire season going back to the beginning now.
Yeah, they definitely played with the timelines and played with the sort of emotional landing of certain elements, right? As you called out in the recap, we were led to believe that she just continued and walked by Joel, but there was actually a conversation that was there, and it was actually a meaningful conversation, which allows the conversation that Ellie has with Gale to have a different significance.
Right.
Where, you know, at that point we thought like, okay, well, she's really asking Gale for forgiveness of like things unspoken.
Right.
But there were things spoken. And it's interesting to me because on one hand, it's a nice bow tie on the present there. Yeah. But on the other hand, it softens the hurt that could have been. And I don't know what is better, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys, especially with this way they did the time skip. I mean, I remember Andy showing me some video showing that like Star Wars was junk until they edited it. And I think the way the season is edited is huge. And it was one of the reasons why the episode's so special, especially this moment that they have right here that Tosin was just talking about, how we didn't know that Ellie stopped to talk to Joel. We just kind of saw that he was there, and then it kind of skips for her in the first episode this season, kind of skips to her going back into her garage. But by showing us the discussion they have, I felt we were in a place where we could effectively say, we could see some nuance in the relationship in a way we hadn't seen anything like that in the past, especially when it comes to like video games and even video game movies. And one of that, right. And by that I mean there's this moment where, you know, she presses him on all the questions she's been preparing on paper about what's going on, what happened in Salt Lake City. And after she realizes that there are no other immune people, and after she realizes that from her perspective he took meaning away from her life by not letting her save the rest of humanity, he's like, all right, can you forgive me? She's like, I don't know if I can forgive you, but I'd like to try. Right. Which shows not only the growth in their relationship, how it's changed. You know, by growth I don't mean like it's gotten bigger, I mean it's just evolved. It doesn't necessarily mean it's better or worse. But the big thing there is the fact that she expresses that she knows who she is, which has been part of the whole issue, right? Through all the birthdays, right? You know, he's like, you know, you're smoking reefer, you're doing this, you're doing that, and she's like, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not, because this is who I am. But a piece there is she understands who she is. She understands that she's, you know, a queer girl who likes marijuana and wants tattoos and wants to, you know, have like a tattoo of a moth that like looks suspiciously like a clitoris. But she also knows, I mean, like you guys saw that, right? Like
I saw the tie-in to the obsession with death, but not the clitoris thing.
Yeah, take a look at the particular moth that's on her actual tattoo. Like take the wings away and you see pretty much like, you know, a clitoral head kind of. But what I'm saying there, what I'm trying to get to is the idea that she's like, I know who I am, but I also love you. And because I love you, I'm going to try to be different from what I am. I'm going to try to forgive you. You know, like I don't know that I can forgive you. I don't know that about myself because I know who I am. But I also know that I'd like to try because I know who you are. And that is super nuanced. Right. Because a lot of characters would be like, I can never forgive you for this. They always speak in absolutes, right? Like think of like Anakin and Padme in episode 3. You know, it's very like,
I'm not sure absolute. The prequels are the best example to hold up. It's
true, but it's like an iconic like speculative fiction franchise, I guess is what I'm saying. But you're right, it's not the best to hold up. My point is, she's 19. She knows who she is, and she knows what she wants, and what she wants is to be back with Joel. So she's going to try to find a way to forgive him. And it's not going to be easy. And that's the ride we would have been on if Abby hadn't come back and taken him out.
Right.
And that is what makes it so tragic, because she was totally unhappy with him.
Right.
And she was trying to make it work. And then Abby takes him out.
That second part of that statement, but I would like to try.
Yes.
Seeing that
Yes.
in this show absolutely killed me. And it means everything for the show because it was a beginning of a way back for Joel and Ellie, and they'll never get that chance because Abby took it away from them.
And that's what Abby took away. She didn't just take away her father figure. She didn't take away her father figure that she was having problems with and like, I'm having problems with him, but it's not for him to take away. She took away her ability to reconcile with this guy who loved her regardless. And we don't see a lot of before the show, Tosin was like asking if it was because, maybe we have kids and so on. That's why we thought the episode was special. I think it's partly because you don't see a lot of avuncular love, non-romantic love, because it's clear by the time she's 19, she's like, you're not my dad, but also you're kind of my dad, but you're not my dad. So you don't have dad authority over me. Right. But you certainly have dad. You have kind of like uncle power.
Right.
You can teach me things. I want to be around you, whatever. You don't see intimacy on that level. Like when he's taking her to the dinosaur and she's climbing the dinosaur, you're like, why is a 16-year-old kid being so crazy about a dinosaur? Right. But then you realize she's never been a kid.
Right.
And then like the space thing, that's her dream. So it's just, I thought it was a pretty amazing thing. She's like, I'd like to try because he's done right by her so many times. She's like, I can give this to him. And Abby takes that away from her. And that's the reason why the cycle of violence continues. And which is, that's kind of what this episode's about, but we can talk about cycles in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as Joel says, if you love someone, you can always see their face. And so I think one thing that it's quite interesting is that you see that reflection of Joel and Ellie, even when she's like beating down on the lady in the last episode, you kind of see that glimmer in her eye. Not only can you see their face, but she sees it in her mind's eye. She sees Joel lying there and she wants to take vengeance on it.
That's a good connection that I hadn't thought of before. Yeah.
And also Joel's eyes aren't working at the end. Like one eye is swollen shut, that kind of thing. But if you're like having seen this episode, you cannot realize that Joel was probably seeing Sarah's face, seeing Ellie's face, regardless of what how his body was working.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to the scene at the museum where Joel takes Ellie to the museum. That sequence where he tells her to close her eyes and imagine that space flight, and how that sequence then plays out, where we get this magic realism view of Ellie going into space, complete with the sun flying over the porthole and everything. That mirrors when in the first season during the episode Left Behind, where she's hanging out with Riley in the mall. That mirrors that scene where Riley is guiding Ellie to play a video game and asks her to close her eyes. And we see the video game play out in the reflection of Ellie's face and what she imagines. There's a nice, mirroring scene, and a nice reflection of what we'd seen in season 1. This special moment of imagination for this person who could never have experienced these things firsthand. And we get to be inside of Ellie's mind for a little bit. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I also like I don't know if we're going to get into technical aspects, but I liked how they did the lighting. They did the everything about that scene where she's going into space. Ellie couldn't experience the light changes, but for us viewing, they changed the lighting. They made it seem like she was getting through the atmosphere. They made it seem like after it was all said and done, she's in the darkness of space. And as she imagines that, listening to this recording, which she found from God knows where and put on cassette tape, it was impressive to see how they transported us, the viewers, along with Ellie. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, and just to point out, the dinosaurs, the space scene is just exactly like in the video game.
Commitment to detail, huh?
Yeah. I think, I think they loved it so much that they wanted to express it and give it its full weight and purpose. And I think that's credit to them.
There's a hole in the dinosaur in the game that wasn't really in the in the movie, but I could have sworn the neck wobbled when she was like pushing on it. And she was standing on its head.
I saw that
and I was like, ah!
I thought it was, what's interesting to note in that whole sequence is that after Ellie's reaction to the space flight, the imagined space flight, you see that Joel is happier than he's ever been as a surrogate parent. I mean, you see him literally crying tears of joy in that scene. It is the apex of Joel's emotional arc in this show, right there in that moment.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. I mean, because here's the thing. This is one of those moments where, he started with like the cake, right?
Right.
And, it's hilarious because, Ellie's probably never had a birthday before he brought her that first cake, which is why in the space of a camera turning, she's like already into it. She's like, yeah, cake, right? What am I waiting for? We're not going to sing happy birthday because I don't even know what that is. But if you notice, he's kept on trying to up the game to the point even where after that, he went for the chocolate. Remember, Seth was like, chocolate or vanilla, say vanilla because chocolate takes longer.
Right.
And so it's just like this is, at the next point when like he finds like the disappointing birthday for him, the first disappointing birthday, he's trying to kind of like up that experience, but he can't. And it just goes to show you like that just proves what you said, that this is the apex. This is the height of that kind of relationship. And it's in part the height of that kind of relationship because she's at a place in her life where this stuff is magical. Her interests change, right? Her interests are going to change to like, want to hook up with people, maybe smoking some ganja, maybe, getting tattoos. Her interests are going to change, and she's throwing away some of those childish things. And, he doesn't know, he can't solve that, right? He can't be,
he's not equipped for that.
He's like, yeah. And as a parent, you're never going to be there everything after they hit a certain moment. Right. There's a space between like 6 and 16 where you're the most influential person in their life. And then there's a moment after that where their friends are the most influential people in their life. And then they move on from you, as people do who grow up. So you're right. I think it was the apex of their relationship, or his fatherhood anyway.
There's that moment when she turns 17 and she, he tells her, as long as you're under my roof. And she reminds him, you don't own anything, which really the subtext there is that no matter what their dynamic is together in their relationship, he's not actually her father.
Right. They're playing house.
Yes.
Yeah. And she also goes and said, hey, I'm not your fucking kid, Joel. I'm your partner.
Right.
Because she thinks that she's gotten to that degree where that she is, she's the gunslinger's partner rather than the kid that he has to protect, and she's grown up on him, right?
Yeah.
So she's no longer this little thing. But the question is like, ultimately, when teenagers get to that age, are they truly grown up? Do they truly know?
Well, it's a mess. That's the whole problem.
They think they are.
Right. It's a mess. That's the whole thing about growing up. Growing up is always going to be messy. It's going to be messy regardless of, how sheltered you are, how much education you have, whatever. There's a point where you have to break away from your parents. And when that happens, it's a bittersweet moment for everybody, or it's a bitter moment for everybody. But it's never like a sweet moment for everybody.
Also, that whole interchange with her saying, I'm your partner, that again reinforces the whole thing. I am not your child. I am not your daughter.
Right. And speaking of daughters, I thought it was interesting that in the very first episode of the show, it's Joel's birthday. You guys remember that?
Right.
And Sarah is taking care of him on his birthday. And it's almost as if it's cathartic for him to be able to take care of Ellie on her birthdays, because on some level, I forgot how old Sarah was when she died, but in the world before the the super pandemic, before the apocalypse, whatever you want to call it, Sarah was a much more grown up person as a youngster, and the coin had already flipped, right? She was taking care of him. Like, you got to get up, Joel. It's your birthday, all this stuff. And he almost didn't get to take care of her like that. And so he gets to relive. He gets a second chance through Ellie, or at least he thinks he gets a second chance. And that second chance is one that Ellie is sort of like, I'm not your kid. I mean, I'll take it when it works for me, but I'm not going to take it when it doesn't work for me. Right. And that's, I think, important.
Let's talk about moths for a second. The symbolism of moths, or as you put it, clitorises. I think it's interesting that, like, you know, Ellie's obsession with moths, drawing moths, the moth imagery, as we learn from Gale, this symbolizes death, not rebirth or renewal, as Joel, you know, mistakenly confuses it with the butterfly. That it feels to me like Ellie instinctively knows from the beginning, from basically from Salt Lake City, that she had this, that she was never meant to live past Salt Lake City. That she,
I think,
right?
I think
that's one way to look at it, for sure. I don't think there's a straight answer is the most important thing, but I think there's a few ways to look at it.
Yeah, I think she considers, in my mind, that she has a greater purpose and that she's going to save the world, and really thoughts of grandeur. I don't know that she necessarily thinks that she needs to die to do so and needs to be a martyr. But I think the way I sort of read it, or felt like in the moment, she was like, oh, that is my greater purpose. I would self-sacrifice, but I don't know that she necessarily would, honestly. And
she's come across as pretty selfish in this episode, right, Tosin?
Well,
I mean, in the series, in the season.
Yeah, and I think she also, like, selfishly, right, she's going on this killing spree for Joel rather than sacrificing for the community. The community vote was that she should stay there. So I don't know that I think another part of this overall tale that we learn is that people are not as altruistic as you believe. They often will push for their own sort of goals and beliefs and feelings there. And, you know, I think while the moth is like symbolic of life, but it's also symbolic of death. It's also symbolic of life, right? So like that's the other side of the aspect of like keep living, right? And that's really what her mom said when she was given away. She wanted her child to keep living, and that's what everyone has been sort of pushing for, other than the other folks who think that her death could be the birth of others, or I guess
the saving of others. Yeah.
Yes.
So I would also say that when it comes to the moth thing, you know, we're in the show, we see Joel say, you know, change and such. Like, you know, he's uncomfortable with these terms.
Right.
A moth it's still about change, right? A moth and a butterfly have a lot of things in common. In fact, moths come out at night, butterflies are out at day. You know, what else? Moths, when moths land, they land with their wings open. When butterflies land, they land with their wings closed, right? So there's, like, you know, you could say that there's some things that moths are more open to than butterflies. Also, the show has a huge character or a huge, like, plot device in the fireflies, right? So much to the point where this episode actually has a moment where she stops and looks at the fireflies on that birthday that we were just talking about with the dinosaur and the space stuff. Yeah. So fireflies are light in the dark. And what does a moth care most about? A flame. They like light in the dark.
Is that the thing that triggered her memory, her recollection of Joel's?
It's almost like she saw a reflection in a lake and realized that not everything is right. You know what I mean? Like she's been preparing, so she didn't get a chance to just read off her list of questions, but that was something she was prepared for, to ask him those questions, and she never got that moment. So they kind of like seeped out of her, and I think that was one of the triggering moments where she's like, I mean, this is all great, but what about the Fireflies?
I was
What
wondering
Salt Lake
about that.
City?
I didn't
Yeah,
make the
think
connection.
there's something to that. I mean, nothing is done sort of, nothing is done. Everything's intentional, you could say.
Right.
But I think that we can definitely take something from that moment. This idea that she stops and sees, with everything being perfect, she still has the lingering need to talk about the Fireflies, to understand where she fits with the Fireflies. So I think it's also important to realize that Gale was like moths mean death, which you brought up, Andy. But Gale doesn't even really believe that. Right. So she's relatively unreliable as a narrator. She's like, dream reading is bullshit.
She doesn't believe in dream interpretation in general, is what I gathered.
Exactly.
But what she's saying is that the common
in the dream
interpretation is
the common
death.
interpretation is death, but at the same time, it's all horseshit anyway. So I think that's a good out for the viewer to be like, okay, I mean, that's one way to look at it, but it's not they're working really hard to make sure that we don't have a definitive answer, right? Because again, moths are still caterpillars. They still become a pupa. They still change. And this is an episode focused on change, right? This is an episode focused on, like, you rarely see an episode where we're skipping year to year to the same day all the time, watching a person go from like 16 to, 19, 20, whatever it is. So the episode is definitely about change. And moths definitely do change, but the episode is also definitely about Ellie's life and how how he saved her from death. Mm-hmm. And when he's looking at Gale in the first episode, and she's like, "What did you do to her?" And he's like, "I saved her." This episode explains the weight of those words. Right. So he's like, "I saved her." And you're like, well, what does that mean? You saved her. She should be grateful. And I think many of us looking at, I played the game. I watched the game, and I did some stuff, and I tried to like get some hours in on the game, but you don't necessarily see that. Like, the way that HBO is doing it is a little different. And so when you're like, yeah, you saved her, she should be grateful. And so you realize that when they're having the conversation on New Year's Eve, the fact that he saved her leaves her feeling robbed of her purpose. Whether it's delusions of grandeur, like Tosin was talking about, or something else, she feels robbed of that purpose. She feels like I could have done something to really impact the way everybody else is living. Instead, you were selfish enough to save me, and that is But I also think that the painful thing.
Tosin has a point in that we don't necessarily know that she would have done that anyway.
You're right. And she's also, she's talking out of anger. She's talking out of disappointment. She's talking out of like, she's in a world right now where, she's into girls, and there's only one lesbian in the whole entire community, and that's it for the rest of her life. So there's dead ends all around her. And she's like, at least if I had died that way, I know I would have, like, it would have been meaningful. Right, because she could die any day. That's another thing we don't talk about. She's smoking marijuana. She's getting her tattoo. She's making out with somebody. She could die any day. Any one of them could die any day. So there's kind of this push to kind of do what you want now, because the promise is that the future is not promised. And I think when you're a teenager, you don't care about the future at all. But in her situation, she's like really trying to live for the moment.
Yeah, one thing that's also interesting about this episode is, surprisingly, Ellie is the one with compassion, right? Joel has promises and crushingly breaks the promise, but Ellie's the one who's like, no, he should be able to say bye to his wife. And like, Ellie usually is the one who's not as compassionate, generally speaking. She's usually, but I wonder, part of me wonders if maybe some of that also changes her into this more harsher individual. Like, maybe she's lost some of that because of the harsh realities of the world and of realizing the things that have happened. But I don't know.
It's really interesting that you say that, because on some level, I really feel as if, so my first reaction was, yeah, she's doing the right thing by compassion. And then I kind of also think that she's, like when you're with younger people and they want to prove that, like, a point, or that they're right or whatever, they may just kind of go against your grain. So before, she's like, the rules say that I'm your partner. I'm not your kid. The partners stay together. And that's the smart thing, right? You got to have a pair is better than a single, even if it's her first time. He didn't pull her out there because he didn't think she could do it. He pushed her back. He held her back effectively because Jesse was out there at 16. She's not out there, what, till 19 or so, 17 or 19. So he made sure she was ready when she went out there. So when she pushes back and says, I'm your partner, I'm going with you, she's ready to do what she needs to do to like help her people out. And so she's all about the rules. And then Eugene's like hurt, he's bit, and the rules are to take him out. But she's like not about the rules then. So it's still very much like I'm going to do what I want to do, as opposed to sort of like having some sort of a focused thesis or maxim about how she's going to behave. So I do think you're right. There's compassion there, but it also kind of goes against her arguments earlier. And things like this don't make sense. They shouldn't make sense. There's definitely going to be times when you're going to try to be a stickler because it works for you. And then you're going to be like, okay, we can like bend the rule here because of the circumstances. But I thought that was pretty interesting too. The compassion versus the sort of like hardcore rule following.
Mm-hmm. So this is an obvious thing to everyone who's seen this episode. But, I would say that this season so far has kind of kept me in the dark because, it was a surprise to me to find out that Ellie actually did know. In prior episodes of this podcast, I'd said, well, Ellie doesn't know the truth about Joel up until this point. But now we find out that she knew about the truth about what Joel did from the very first episode, because Joel told her himself before the wolves attacked.
After her ultimatum, too. She's like, look, if you can't tell me the truth, we're done.
Right.
And if there's one thing that Joel was afraid of, it was being done when it comes to Ellie. So that was another thing. That's why this. I mean, we were talking before the show, and so I was like, I don't know why this episode's so special. I think that's why this. If the season is like, the season has an arc, right? And if you can imagine an arch in a wall, there's like that capstone that holds everything together,
right?
And the capstone's usually in the center. Now, I'm speaking metaphorically, but this is the capstone in the arc of this season. This is the thing that puts it together, that makes it make sense.
Yes,
that lays out the motivations for us in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise understood.
And as I said earlier in the episode, I would argue that it's the capstone in the entire series. Which,
I could kind of see that.
We'll get into it a little bit more when we get into theories.
It's a big picture element for sure.
Yes.
This is a big picture episode. Absolutely.
One thing I found really interesting in this episode is, typically the way we see Joel is he uses actions to speak, right? Actions to show his love and his care. But this is the first time, that he actually uses words to express his emotions when he says, because I love you. And I think in the moment where Ellie's later beating up on fools,
she's busting heads.
Yeah, she's like, when he says to her, I hope you do a little better than me. I think part of that is like this love for Joel, but another thing is because it's this like love and protection of this potential child that she might be having, because now she is the father figure, so to speak, or potential father figure.
Right.
In this
definitely.
So it's just it's very interesting and connecting, and it's very cyclical, right, Dwayne?
That's totally it. And so that's the cycle. The cycle that I see here is that, in the beginning, we've seen Ellie get on the cycle of revenge that Abby has gone down. And we've talked about that, right? It's a cycle of violence. And yet we also see in Dina the literal cycle of life, right? This episode gives us all this information that we didn't have. The idea that Joel was working to break the cycle of violence that he grew up with, the harsh parenting where he was taking beatings for Tommy from his dad, right? And if you go back to his relationship with Sarah, his daughter, you see that it was much less business-like the way he was with his father, and much less formal than the one he had with his own dad. And which is kind of why when Gail, the psychiatrist, says, or psychologist, I'm sorry, says in episode 5, just an episode ago, she's like talking to Tommy, and she's like, Ellie is bringing the violence. It's in Ellie. The violence is coming through Ellie. Because if you see this episode and you see kind of how Joel was trying to be, he was trying to not bring that level of relationship, the violence, all that stuff with him into Ellie. He was trying to protect her from that. He was trying to do exactly what Tosin just said. Hope you do a little bit better than me, right? And so I feel like with Ellie, she's born in fire effectively. She's literally born as her mother's being like converting into a zombie or whatever. And the rest of her life is incredibly harsh. So that's kind of what's driving her situation. But if you think about this whole thing with Abby versus Ellie, Joel kills Abby's father, and then Abby kills Ellie's adopted father, and then Ellie's now going out to kill Abby. That's a cycle of violence. But it's interesting to see that Joel was trying to arrest that cycle of violence, to stop it, to hope that like he could bring Ellie up in this Jackson Hole place where, the violence from the outside world wasn't as key to living as it was when they were on their way there, that they could get away from all the things that happened in Salt Lake City. They could insulate her from that, so that she, when she became a parent, could do a little better than him. And once we learn that she's going to be a parent, not only a parent, but a self-identifying dad, it kind of changes the game on that. So I think that was pretty interesting. Speaking of cycles also, and as we discussed before, Joel was wearing the watch that his dad wore. So the watch has double significance, right? It's significant because it stopped working with Sarah's life ending. And then also it's the watch that his father wore. But if you're looking around on the desk, Ellie's knife is in the desk, right? And Ellie's knife was the knife that her mother had in her hands when Ellie was born. So they're both carrying around these mementos of their gone parents. Right. So so it's interesting. Yeah. So it's kind of nuts because as much as she's not his daughter, she's still like her life is a reflection of his through different circumstances. So like there's just like different layers of cycles happening here all at once. And I thought that was also pretty beautiful. We didn't know about the watch being his dad's until now. Right. And once I saw the watch, then I noticed then my eyes were open to the knife, and I had to go back and see. Yeah, that is the knife that her mom had, the kind of like, I forgot what it's called, flip knife, pen knife, pocket knife, whatever, that her mom had, and that's like her one link to her mother. So interesting that kind of plays into a theory that I have moving forward from our episode discussion into theories. So. I'm going to lay this out there, and I'm hoping I'm not spoiling anything. But again, I haven't played this game, so this is pure conjecture to me. But I feel like since we've been talking so much about the cycle of Joel's father telling Joel that when you become a parent, I hope you are a little better than what I've done. And from there, we've seen Joel raise Sarah and then continue to raise Ellie to be a little better than his father gave him. And now, obviously, we're seeing it's Ellie's opportunity to be a dad. And so I don't know how the rest of this series is going to play out, but I can almost guarantee that it's going to involve Dina's child at one point, Dina and Ellie's child, and Ellie being that dad and teaching their child to be better than she was, to be. Or trying to be a better
parent
to the child she experienced herself.
Than she experienced from Joel, Joel experienced from his own dad. And I think that maybe we won't see the watch passed down, but we will see the pocket knife being passed down from Ellie to
mom to daughter to daughter. Yeah,
that's my theory.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well,
Yeah,
I
that's
guess
we'll have to wait and see.
I'm curious. Do you guys think? Do you think that Joel was better than his father? Was a little bit better?
Oh
than his father?
Absolutely.
Oh, totally. And that's one of the things I'm thinking back to earlier when you were talking to us, and like, because we're parents, do we like resonate with that or whatever? And on some level we did. Like if I hear the stories that my mother tells about my grandmother, there were like what they call licks, or like serious super spankings involved, right?
Right.
And then here we are 2 generations later, and 2025, and that's not even a thought. Like, we have all these verbal techniques to get kids in line. We have ways of negotiating with them. We have all these things. So there is like sort of like that little better, and some of that stuff you take, and then some of that stuff you don't take, right? Because it's always going to be incremental, right? And that's the thing about humanity, at least at our at this current juncture. It's we move incrementally through things. Yes, a lot of things have changed in the last 100 years since my 97-year-old grandmother was born, right? We have like the internet and stuff like that. But in terms of how we raise each other and like the traditions we pass on, the culture is one that moves through increments. There are watershed changes, like World War II or whatever, but it's fundamentally like, the language changes incrementally.
Sure.
The way we deal with food changes over time, and we change incrementally. So that's why this whole like little bit better, this idea that we're edging forward is a thing. It's even a thing in our economy. Like, we don't talk about, 50% growth year over year. We kind of talk about 3%, right? We're just doing a little better, hopefully, than we did last time. And that's enough to keep things working.
This is
I feel like that's
a universal hope, I think, for any parent, is to give your child a better life than...
And for any mentor.
Yes.
Because fundamentally, a parent is a mentor. And if there's, regardless of what Joel and Ellie's relationship was, he was her mentor, to the point where she's sitting there holding a guitar, playing it, because that's how they both express themselves, right? Also, speaking of guitars, do you guys remember when Joel said, "I can't sing"? And she's like, "You got to sing something for me for his birthday." Joel can't sing.
Yes. Yes. But, also that might be Joel not being able to sing, not Pedro Pascal.
Right. I'm not saying, I don't know what Pedro Pascal's capable of, but I just know that Joel can't sing. And I do think that song is pretty important, because the lines that he sings are, effectively like, if I lose you, I'd lose myself, right?
Right.
And then if you look at the cycle there, when he worried that he would lose, when he lost Sarah, he lost himself. He became an uber violent Joel. And when he lost Ellie, he lost himself, mega super version, killing 18 people in the span of 40 minutes or so. And then when he dies, Ellie loses herself.
Yeah.
Right? She's like, I'm gonna leave all these people. I just got mad at Joel because he took my purpose of life, which could be saving like the humanity. And we all know that being together in Jackson is gonna make everybody in Jackson safer. And yet she loses herself because she's like, I'm going up to Seattle. I'm gonna kill people. She's not even thinking. They don't even have a plan, right? Dina has to like figure out the plan, because Ellie is not in a place where she's got that capability, because she's lost herself, right? So I feel like that Pearl Jam song with its line, "If I ever were to lose you, I'd surely lose myself," super well chosen for that moment. Maybe
even a little on the nose, if I'm being honest. But
it's totally. But I feel like a lot of people, especially me, I wasn't even like, normally I wouldn't have paid attention to the actual words. I would have listened to like the song and the emotion. Like, for instance, "Take on Me." I don't really know how the lyrics played into that particular moment in the episode, right? I just know that it sounded good. Yeah. Whereas this, I think maybe I recognize the lyrics because it sounded so not good. If that's a thing. I'm not trying to hate. I'm just trying to say, it's kind of like when I listen to like Hamilton, I'm like, oh, can we move on from Lin-Manuel singing? Like he's a great rapper.
Yeah.
To the actual singing. Like, let's
A
just
fantastic playwright, a fantastic musical theater author.
He's got the EGOT, the PGOT with the Pulitzer, but like, when it comes to the lyrics, like just move
probably
on to the prose, bro.
Worst choice for the lead of that musical. So getting into more,
I love you, Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'm sorry.
Yes, much love. Getting into more of the technical aspects, where we talk about the behind the scenes elements we enjoyed in this episode, along with that song, which is "Future Days" by Pearl Jam. I noticed that Joel's silhouette is once again in the opening credits for this episode. Fitting, I think.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. I guess because we went back in time.
Yeah.
Right. There wasn't even a kind of forward skip in this thing. It was just back in time. So during the time of this episode, they were together.
Right. Joe Pantoliano as Eugene. Joey Pants, as I like to call him.
I recognized him, and
Cypher from The Matrix, man.
Exactly, and he looks
older.
Yeah, he's older for sure, but the transformation wasn't just the age. Like he was playing a different role from the smooth talker that you find, what was he in? Was he in Bound also?
Bound as well.
Yeah, he's in Bound and he's in The Matrix, and he's just like a smooth talker, and he plays like he usually used to play.
He's also in Bad Boys and all.
Yes. He was and
Goonies.
Bad Boys. Oh, he was in Goonies. Good call, Andy. I mean, he's one of my favorite actors, and he was kind of a character. He was kind of a character actor for a minute, playing the bad guy. Right. And then like you see him in Bad Boys, and he's kind of like the begrudging leader. And then here he's just playing somebody totally different. This guy who just wants to see his wife again. And yeah, I was happy to see him.
The Fugitive and U.S. Marshals.
That's right.
Ones.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Right. I gotta say, I skipped on U.S. Marshals.
Same.
The Fugitive was a classic for me.
But yes,
you should check that one. He does have hair though. So.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
In that scene where where Joel shoots him, I really love that moment where you see it happen, but you don't actually see it. You see the wide shot of the landscape of the lake.
Yes.
And you hear like a musical bass note in the
It's
in
not
the
even
music.
that you don't see it happen. It's that you don't even hear it happen.
You don't hear it
every
happen.
other shot that's in every other use of the sort of like I'm going to kill Old Yeller or whatever it's going to happen there, like someone's getting put down. You may not see the actual shot on screen, but you hear the crack of the bullet coming out of the barrel, and then you see the birds fly. And here, because we're at a place where we all know that visual trope, they're like, we're not even going to have that. We're just going to show the birds going.
Right, which I thought was classy as hell.
It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And it also gives you an idea, like if Ellie is a little up the hill getting the horses, and she sees the birds, she sees the birds like fly, that is her perspective of Joel breaking his promise. Right. And it's, and that like note is like a thud in her own heart as Joel breaks his promise to her.
Hope flying away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that last scene in this episode between Pedro and Bella, just masterful acting. Just love that. I just love to be in that moment with the two of them while they were playing off of each other. It's the best acting I think I've seen the two of them do in this entire series.
We've known that she was a great choice for this role because of the work she did in Game of Thrones, right? Like she just kind of stood out. She like what's the word? The phrase is breakthrough. She broke through what was going on there, and I feel like it's moments like this where she gets to showcase the talent more than just playing the defiant teenager and all that stuff. She gets to kind of just be this character, right? This she embodied it. Like she's not even Bella Ramsey. She's just Ellie in that moment. And it was pretty awesome. And of course, Pedro Pascal is doing his he's doing his work too.
All right, let's
vulnerability.
Vulnerability, amazing, so much vulnerability. Let's talk about the ephemera, which are some links and extra textual connections that'll help you enhance your enjoyment of this episode. We saw a name drop of a book in this episode.
Yeah, Earth Abides is the book that Gail is reading. It's a post-apocalyptic science fiction novel by George R. Stewart, but they kind of Andy, want to tell us a little bit about?
I mean, I thought again, it feels a little on the nose that she's reading this book because the plot is it's about the fall of civilization from a deadly disease and the emergence of a new culture with simpler tools. So a little on the nose, but I'll give it to him. I'll give it to the showrunners.
If you're living in this world and you find that book and you read it, you're like, okay, so people were thinking about this. I don't feel as alone. Maybe that's what you're feeling. I don't know, but it was on top of it. It was very on the nose, like you said.
We have a news report from Collider. Collider did an interview with Craig Mazin, the showrunner of The Last of Us, and he said that he said there's no way to complete this narrative in a third season. So in other words, there's going to be a season 3 and 4, he believes.
That's just masterful manipulation of a studio right there. Right?
Yeah.
Being like, it's Last of Us parts 1 and 2. We're going to get in, do part 1 in the season. Part 2 is longer. We're going to do 2 seasons. Then we're going to be out. Your commitment is over, whatever. And then drop this stuff in an interview after like the show's getting all this acclaim and all this like whatever. And like, it's just masterful. I mean, I would be mad for the fact that they need whatever they need to get this done.
I think though, some of the reaction online to this, is mixed, I would say. There are people who absolutely love the show and are like, let's just keep it going for as long as we can. But if they are only telling the narrative arc within The Last of Us Part 2 video game, there are people who have played the game that are saying that we're already, so far up until this point, we're already halfway through that second video game. So how are we going to take the remainder of what's in that video game and stretch it out for two more seasons is the question. I don't have the answer to this, as I said, because I haven't played the game. What is a
season, right? So like on some level, this season is 7 episodes.
Yeah. Which
is on the smaller side for an American produced TV product. We don't really do the 26 episode seasons anymore. Right. I will thank goodness. But I mean, like if there were a 10 episode season, then that would make sense. On some level, it's like if season 3 is supposed to be 7 episodes as well as season 2, it can kind of be looked upon as like a kind of giant 13 episode season, right? Which is still not super huge for American television standards. So
he did say in this interview that he thinks season 3 will be longer than season 2.
Right, but that also might mean that season 4 is super short. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying that a season is, and because he's talked about the malleability of the size of seasons, I just feel like there's a lot of wiggle room there. You know what I mean?
And this is partly why also my theory is that season 4, at least part of it, if not all of season 4, is going to involve Ellie bringing up this child between her and Dina that we haven't seen born yet.
Or maybe Naughty Dog is going to surprise us with like a chunk of DLC that he wants to cover.
It could be. Right? There could be a Last of Us Part 3 video game for sure.
Yeah, I mean, a whole video game would definitely be a surprise considering that the long tail it takes to make these things and how they announce every little bit of them. But I do think that there might be some DLC that they've been talking to him about that maybe we don't know about. Or maybe they've been in conjunction together because they're watching this and they're seeing how faithful he is to it. And like, when you watch someone adapt what you're doing, it inspires you to do more. So, there's a lot that can happen is all I'm saying.
Anything else you want to cover before we sign off for the night?
No, I mean, this was just a great episode. It was pretty special. Right. And I think it has the same universal appeal, I think, that we saw toward the end of last season when we met Bill.
Right.
And his husband. It just kind of has that kind of like it transcends the actual story. Yes, it has key implications for the plot, but if you saw this episode on your own, without knowing anything else, you'd be compelled to go back and see like how we got here. And I think that's a key feather in the cap for the series.
Right. All right, well, so that's going to do it for this episode of Quarantine Zone. I'm going to go around the table and ask where people can find your work on the internet when you're not talking about The Last of Us. Dwayne, how about yourself?
You can check me out on Blue Sky. You can also, see what I've done on Instagram. And yeah, Tosin, what about you?
You can find me at Instagram at burnttoast45. What about yourself, Andy?
You can catch me online at Mr. Babyman. That's my social media handle. I'm on X and Blue Sky. Our own show is on X and Blue Sky at QZ Pod. We're on all the major podcast distribution networks. Until next week, drop us an email, tweet us, leave us a comment on iTunes, and we will see you after the last episode of this season here on Quarantine Zone. Thanks for joining us.
Episode of The Last of Us.